Good morning. Mark has a story. My husband, Mark, has a story which he has told many times over the many years that we've been together about a memorable camping trip with two other friends. Now, Mark is a very reasonable, good camper and packer and is knowledgeable and trustworthy. And so in this story, we're just going to treat him as kind of the neutral person, the storyteller. So these other two campers, one was a friend named Jim, who was notorious for how meticulously he prepared for camping in a time when people didn't write such things up on their computers. He had a file called camping.txt, which he built on over the years and carefully maintained of everything to bring and everything to do to get ready for a camping trip. He was what was called an ouncer. These are people who don't count pounds when they're thinking about pack weight. They count ounces. These are the people that drill large holes in the handles of their metal cook pot so that it weighs that much less than if they hadn't drilled the holes. The other friend, whose name is Rick, showed up at the meeting point to get ready for this short couple, maybe one night, maybe two, backpacking trip. It was a light rain falling, and Rick shows up in the parking lot with a light backpack, a small pack, inside of which he has a sleeping bag and a jar of peanut butter. He's wearing jeans and hush puppies and, a t-shirt, a flannel shirt on top. And the super prepared guy was so freaked out and annoyed. And Rick was like, oh, well, I mean, he was all right. It rained, it snowed. When it snowed, they just kind of huddled together like a bunch of sardines with a tarp thrown over all of them. But it's a story about being over prepared versus being under prepared. But the most important thing about the story is that everyone is invited. Everyone in that story gets to go camping. The thing that separates the two campers is that one was prepared for that particular moment in time, and the other was prepared for anything. One was like a bridesmaid who knew that weddings always happen in the middle of the afternoon, or at least they always did in ancient Palestine. And the other is like a bridesmaid who knows that things can go wrong. But no one is in or out. Everyone is included and invited to the party. The work that is before us is what we do with our invitation to the party, or the wedding, or the camping trip, or life in God. In the book of Deuteronomy, near the end, Moses blesses the people. The Bible doesn't tell us what he says. 1,000 years later, in another part of the world, after following centuries of scholarship, a rabbi figured it out. The story that was then handed down is that Moses's blessing was, may the divine presence rest in the work of your hands. I don't know how they figured it out, but I'll take it. And I would add, may the divine presence rest in your heart and in your mind. It is there in our hands, hearts, and minds that we can be with God in the unexpected. The unexpected is always before us. I think it is part of our human condition that we don't like that. We don't like not knowing how things will turn out. This past week, many of us were reminded of that in rather a big way. Even when we were assured, either by members of our household or somebody in the press or a presidential candidate, even when we were assured over and over again of the outcome, the uncertainty and the waiting was nearly unbearable, right? Most of us, even people like me who claim to have a fairly high tolerance for risk taking and, in some settings, a fairly adventurous spirit, most of us like things to be settled. There are many people for whom the outcome of the election we just had, the outcome of most elections, doesn't matter. I'm talking about the community of people who come for supper on Tuesday nights. I'm talking about the people who come to Rahab Sisters. I'm talking about people living in tents all over Montevilla, whom volunteers from Rahab Sisters cook for and bring food to on Sunday afternoons. Nothing changes for them this week. And in the reign of God, they too are invited to the party. Being prepared all the time means remembering that all the time. The great liberator and activist Cesar Chavez wrote, "It is possible to become discouraged about the injustice we see everywhere. But God did not promise us that the world would be humane and just. God gives us the gift of life and allows us to choose the way we will use our limited time on earth. It is an awesome opportunity." In other words, understanding and even embracing a stance of being prepared for the unexpected is one of the ways that we can engage the injustice around us. I'm talking about the injustice that leaves people sleeping on the sidewalk in the cold. Injustice that makes vulnerable women and men and trans people even more vulnerable in this pandemic. I'm talking about injustice which is not, I'm sorry to tell you, going to disappear because we have a new president-elect. Understanding and even embracing a stance of being prepared for the unexpected is one of the ways that the divine presence works through our hands and hearts and minds. This was true for the bridesmaids who had all that extra oil in their lamp. They were carrying the divine presence in their hands and hearts. And what about the bridesmaids who didn't have enough oil? There's that really distressing ending of this morning's gospel. One of those times when I want to say, "Really, Jesus?" That ending when the bridegroom says, "I do not know you." Everyone is invited. So the way that I understand this ending is that when we don't carry with us that spirit of being prepared for the unexpected, being prepared to be God's divine presence while we wait for the transformation of the world into the kingdom. When we don't carry that divine presence in us, then we suffer in the dark. Or we find ourselves camping in the snow without enough food or the right shoes. Look around in your community, your family, your neighborhood, our parish. Who might be feeling like an outsider today? Who is disappointed by the outcome of the election? Or disappointed by things as they are? Who is outside, literally or figuratively, waiting for God's justice? I believe that God is always inviting us. In the parable we heard this morning, and in the world we live in this past week, 2020, 2021, God is always inviting us to look for who is outside, who needs light or food or shelter or companionship, virtual or otherwise. God is always inviting us and always giving us ways to be Christ's hands and heart in the world. Welcome to the party.